about a minute till Bill McKenna, our clerk, if you want to, you probably already are, but if you've got a sense for quorum and so forth, I'll be looking to you shortly.
Yeah, we have 44 participants or screens so far, and I'm counting the number of doubles.
Okay. Don't count me.
Oh, yeah, you can't count Bill.
That's right. So.
Hi, Demarie.
I'm sitting back here. Bill's sitting over here.
All right. Well, I count, Bill, yeah, I see now that we've got the 48 participant windows, and then, of course, some of these folks are couples. Now I have 49, about to be 50. So I believe that means we have a quorum.
At least 14 doubles. Some of my I'm assuming are doubles.
Okay.
No video. The Kennedys, the Sigmars,
Right. Right.
So yeah, I think we have over. We need, yeah, 52. Yeah, but no, we're 560. You know, we need
56.
Yes.
So I think we should
we think we have it.
All right. Wonderful. Thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. We are just at the hour. We're just a minute past, so I want to honor y'all's time. You got an email with the agenda of the meeting, and are there any edits, additions, or corrections? Teresa McKenna.
No, I was just waving to Jeremy, and I was just waving to the Gambles. I'm sorry. I'll behave from now on.
I'm like, all right.
Don't throw me out. Give me another chance.
Like, all right. We've got a motion on the floor about which I know nothing. Any additions, corrections to the agenda? Hearing none, we will consider it approved. I'm going to talk about some protocol pieces in a moment, but why don't I just start by following this agenda, and that opening prayer is where we are. God, what a gift it is to be called together as First Presbyterian Church, Georgetown, Texas. And this is not at all how we long to gather, and how we've so frequently gathered over the years, and how we gathered last year at this very time. And yet what a gift to come in Zoom and hear familiar laughter and smiling faces, and appreciate one another's homes even in the background. We are reminded that through it all, it is such a gift that we journey alongside one another, and that you are faithful. You are faithful to abide, faithful to lead. And we're grateful that we can spend a little bit of time considering all that you've done this past year, and looking ahead to where you're leading us now. In Jesus' name, amen. Okay, so a couple of just logistic things before we get going with the agenda. One, I think a lot of you are getting pretty familiar with Zoom, but folks, as they come in, are purposely muted at this point, just so we're sure we're not catching all the background noise that can come up inadvertently and so forth. There are times after each report where we can have some questions, and what you can do is a couple options. At the bottom of your screen where it says participants, if you click on that, the participant should pop out, but you should see a little section where you have like a little blue hand that you could raise and be like, hey, I've got a question, and you can just click the little blue hand, and that's the easy way to let us know. If the blue hand's kind of new to you, you're not used to using that, it's a little unfamiliar, you can wave all over the screen, and surely Philip and I will eventually see you. I don't anticipate just a basket full of questions at every report, and so you can simply also just wave your hand and unmute yourself and say, hey, I have a question. But again, I'll remind you that as we go along with if folks do have a question at any of these reports. Let me pause there. Any questions on that little logistic though? Okay. We are going to open. I'm excited. Jamie Cowan put together a year in pictures slideshow, and this will relate directly to my pastor report actually. And so I'm thrilled for the way it helps us just take a few moments before we dump into anything else and appreciate some of what God's been doing in our midst this past year. And so in a moment, I'm going to share my screen and let us enjoy the gift of this to open.
Bravo.
Bravo indeed. Wow. All the emotions. All the emotions. Thank you, Jamie, for that gift, for capturing this family and really God's faithfulness and carrying this family all of last year. That's one to watch and watch again, for sure. And got some nice comments in the comment section coming through about it. And I'm going to come back to some of that in more detail with the pastor's report, but we'll keep moving along. Next item on the agenda is the 2020 membership changes. I'm not going to walk through that page. I'm only going to highlight. You've got that page in your packet, the second page. Our membership this time last year, on December 31st, 2019, was 560. And a year later was 562. Some of the gains happened through profession of faith and the confirmation class, some reaffirmations of faith, some letters of transfer, and then some losses. We had folks transfer to other congregation, some deaths. But please, you can look at that, and what's really, and some baptisms, of course, are named on there. What's really helpful to see on there is that Christina did a nice job putting all the names down, so you can be mindful of some of the folks who are newer among us, and some of the folks we've said goodbye to. Anyway, that's your second page in your packet. I'm going to keep moving, though, to our financial reports. And Keith Brainerd is the chair of stewardship and finance this year and also the treasurer. And he is going to offer his report. After his report, if there are any questions, you can raise that little blue hand or just wave along your screen or even just unmute and say, I've got a question. But we will take questions after this, this report. So Keith, if you want to unmute and go ahead and share your report.
Can you hear me now?
Yep, great.
All right, I've got a few minutes of prepared remarks. I'm going to summarize the financial position of the church and talk about our budget a little bit. We at FPC are fortunate to have a church with so many committed and faithful members who have continued to participate in the life of the church, to attend worship, if only virtually, to volunteer in myriad ways, and to have continued to give financially. We have a strong foundation to work from and to build on. We are a strong church, but these are challenging times. The pandemic has disrupted life as we knew it for just about everyone. Some have lost their job or their source of income has been disrupted. Not holding in-person worship services disrupts not just the rhythm of the church, but it also diminishes normal giving patterns, including loose offerings from visitors and members. Last year, in 2020, we had 19 faithful members join the church triumphant. In terms of financial giving, that represented $48,000 in annual pledges that we no longer receive. We were fortunate to have received a forgivable loan from the federal government in the amount of about $120,000. Forgivable means that if we fulfilled the terms of the loan, chiefly by using the money to pay for staff and other core purposes, we would not have to pay it back. We did fulfill the terms of the loan, and it served as a grant to the church. We also received a smaller loan, which amounts to a grant, through Williamson County. And in this challenging environment, the church finished the 2020 budget year with a deficit of about $44,000. This deficit requires a draw on the church's general fund. Fortunately, the general fund is large enough to sustain a deficit like that for a year or two, but not much more. Pledged giving for 2021 is $818,000, lower than the 2020 figure by about $20,000. Last month, the church sessions budget committee met to identify spending reductions from the budget originally proposed and approved by the session. The session paired spending to be as lean as possible without laying off our valuable staff and without cutting into essential church programs. With these cuts and our pledged income, the session approved a budget for 2021 that includes a projected deficit of around $5,000. We hope to make up this amount during the course of the year with giving that exceeds our projections. But that deficit does not account for some revenue and some required spending. For example, although we received an insurance check to replace most of the church's roof, a project that will be underway soon, that check does not cover the cost of the fascia around most of the church that will need to be replaced as part of the roof replacement. Also, the session is considering adding an electronic screen to Fellowship Hall, which would facilitate both virtual and live worship services. The session is also considering improvements to the ventilation system throughout the church. That would improve the air quality in the church, which will be beneficial both during the pandemic and beyond. Fortunately, we have some limited funds from one-time gifts to the church, and the session is considering how to best apply those gifts. We're trying to balance near-term needs and wants with long-term financial viability. 2021 will be a financial ballet with a reduced budget, a decline in pledges, and off-budget spending demands. As always, 10% of projected annual income, not counting the cost of paying off the education building loan, will go to the many outside missions our church supports. To name just a few, this includes Meals on Wheels, the Caring Place, the Waymeyers in Mexico, the Copsies in the Philippines, Backpack Buddies, Faith in Action, and many more. Going forward, we are taking the budget 1 year at a time. A regular deficit is not sustainable. We will need to increase revenue or we will have to cut spending further. The forgivable loans we received this year were vital in allowing us to avoid making cuts to church staff or programs or both. These loans bought our church some time to avoid painful budget reductions, but overall giving will need to increase by next year or we are likely to face some very difficult choices. Please know that your Stewardship and Finance Committee, the session, and the church staff are all working to keep costs down and to do all we can to sustain and to even grow the church, as we are called to do. We appreciate your confidence in us, your generosity to First Presbyterian, and your prayers. Everyone should have received access to the financial documents, including the budget, and we would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Keith. Yeah, and so at this time, if you've got a question, you can raise your hand, unmute, let us know if you've got a question for Keith, our treasurer, about his report. George Harwell, you want to unmute? Let's make sure you're unmuted first, George. Still not quite there. Let's see.
Maybe George could type his questions using the chat feature.
That's true, George. You could also type it in the chat feature if you'd like, because right now it's still on unmute. But if you see where you can click chat, oh, you're unmuted. You're unmuted. You did it.
Hey, all right. That's my operator. Can you hear me?
Yes, you good.
We continue to advertise the mission budget as 10%. But if my arithmetic is correct, for 2021, again, it is below 10%. I calculated at 8.9. Maybe give us some insight on that.
Thanks, George. I believe the financial policies and procedures say 10% of pledged income or projected income, excluding the payment of debt. And what we're doing right now is amortizing the education building loan. And the amount that is in the budget should be right at 10% of projected annual income for this year. And I'll be happy to take a look, and I'll work with the Stewardship and Finance Committee to double check our numbers and we'll get back with you, but it should be at 10%.
Thank you. My own comment on mission budget is that 68% of our mission budget goes to support PCUSA agencies, and that's not a great mission effort to me. We need to spread that away from the PCUSA agencies and support other needs. Thank you.
Thanks, George. I know there are members of the mission committee on this call, and I'm sure that they will be discussing that and getting back with you.
Thank you, George. Appreciate that. Thank you, Keith. Other questions that may have come up for Keith's report? I'm watching my screens. I'm not seeing or hearing anyone unmute.
Bobby?
Yeah. George?
Yeah. If nobody else has, I got a couple more.
I see Ann Gowdy has one.
Okay.
Excuse me for interrupting.
Go ahead.
Okay, Ann, you want to go ahead and ask yours, and then we'll come back to you, George. Ann.
Sure.
I admit I haven't studied this really carefully, but somewhere in here do we reflect the contributions and expenses for the renovations in the gathering place?
They should be reflected in the balance sheet. That project has finished. That was that's considered a one-time project, and we received all the money that was needed to finance that project and had a little left over. And the money that was left over, consistent with the church financial policies, was deposited into the church endowment fund. And so it was about $5,000 in excess of the projected amount that was collected. And so that project's books have been closed.
Thank you, Keith. Appreciate that. George, you had another question?
Yes, sir. I could not locate an expense item for the debt retirement. Maybe I missed it somewhere. So maybe Keith can point it out to me.
That's education building loan, and it should be at the very bottom or near the very bottom of the list there, George.
It should be, and I can't find it.
George, how about after the call, I'll get with you and we'll highlight it and make sure you can put your eyes on it.
You mentioned that we can't sustain for a long period of time deficit spending. But I noticed that since 2018, that's 2018, 2019, 2020, we have the deficit spend. I agree, it's got to come to an end sometime, and I'm sorry that it's come this long because we're using up our funds.
Yeah, well, an important part of the issue, obviously, is the size of the deficit. And the size of the general fund right now is large enough that if we had a relatively minor deficit, as we're projected to have in 2021, honestly, we could do that for a few years. Not that we necessarily would, but that would be sustainable. We have roughly $120,000 in the general fund. This year, we have a projected deficit of about $5,000. And so you are right, we cannot continue to run a deficit, but it's also a matter of how large the annual deficit is.
Does the PPP loan have a...
George, you went out at the end of your question. Does the PPP loan have a what?
A time limit, a limit that we have to expend those funds?
Yes, it does. The PPP loan is all finished. We have been forgiven, and the books are closed on the PPP loan.
Are there any other questions on Keith's report? Thank you.
Bobby?
Yes.
Can you hear me? This is Darlene. My picture isn't showing, but I have a silly question. But if we donated to the church for Meals on Wheels and those kind of things that we support outside of the church, would that benefit us any? Would it benefit the church any in our planning?
Darlene, this is Keith. Are you saying that if you made a contribution directly to Meals on Wheels rather than to the church, would that benefit the church?
No, what I'm saying is if instead of donating directly to Meals on Wheels, I donated it to the church and designated Meals on Wheels on my check, would that do anything?
Well, if you did that money, if you designated Meals on Wheels as the intended beneficiary, then that money would go to Meals on Wheels. I don't believe that would affect the church budget unless you used that contribution instead of your normal pledge that you might be giving to the church.
No, I would mean it to be an additional pledge. Instead of my sending money to Meals on Wheels, I was just thinking if I sent it to the church, are we not donating as the church to, let's say, just Meals on Wheels?
We do. Meals on Wheels is one of, I don't know, 20, 25 different recipients of the church's mission budget, which again is 10% of projected annual giving. So about 10% of all of the pledges, the income that comes into the church, goes to a number of programs, of which Meals on Wheels is one.
Well, what if we designated that? Would that not help? I mean, in addition to our normal pledge.
That would help Meals on Wheels, for sure. But I don't believe, if I understand you, I don't believe that it would have a material effect on the church budget or church finances.
If I could jump in real quick, I can kind of answer that.
Good.
If any member donates to the church as for a specific mission project, it goes into basically a kind of off the books account, and then it goes straight to that mission project. It's not shown as income because it is a designated donation for that particular mission. So it would not affect us at all one way or the other than we would get maybe more goodwill with the places where we're giving our money to because it's coming at a bigger check from the church.
Not worried about the goodwill. I'm worried about the money.
Yeah, it would not affect our income or our expenses at all.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Excellent, thank you. Other questions about Keith's report? Okay, I'm not seeing anyone or hearing any more unmuting, I don't believe. Philip, are you seeing anything? No, okay. Then we will continue on. Many thanks to Keith for that thoughtful preparation of that report. And yeah, we have our, we are so grateful for the foundation we've built, and we will continue to work at this in the coming year. I will now go to our trustees and ask Tim Harris to unmute. Yes, great.
Okay. I'm Tim Harris. I'm the outgoing senior trustee, and I'm joined by current trustees Jana McCown and Sturdy Wanamaker, and our incoming trustee is Gary Neelan. Well, 2020 was a challenging year for everyone, and the Agnes Brinkland Trust was no exception. First of all, for most of the year, we were unable to meet in person, so we had Zoom meetings, and we had a couple of meetings where we were heavily masked. We made it work, and in the end, we had a lot of good things happen in 2020. We achieved many of our goals last year, but we had to push some to this year. Our first goal was developing a master plan for the church cemetery, which was not accomplished, but will move forward under the purview of Jana McCowan this year. We did establish an investment strategy for the trust's funds, and we made some improvements to the church cemetery. For those who don't know, the Agnes Brinklam Trust was created by a deed from Mrs. Agnes Brinklam some 70 years ago, when she donated her land east of town to the trustees of the First Presbyterian Church, but only for the benefit of the Presbyterian Cemetery. There are roughly 98 acres of that land left, and that acreage is located at the intersection of State Highway 130 and Patriot Way, east of town. In 2019, the trust sold 12 acres to another church, and we received the bulk of those proceeds in 2020. Another 60 acres of the least desirable portion of the trust property is currently under contract to a developer who plans a very nice development on the property that will enhance the value of the remaining property and bring utilities to the remaining property as well. That contract will not close until late 2021 or early 2022. The trust will be left with prime property at both corners of that intersection. The trustees also made some improvements to the cemetery last year. Early in the year, we completed an expansion of the urn garden, added a sprinkler system and new sod. We sold 8 plots in the new urn garden and 2 memorial tree stones. The church also held some outdoor church services at the cemetery last year due to COVID, and they were well received. And very late this year, we had electric service installed at the cemetery, as the church has indicated they would like to have more functions there. The cemetery looks a little better each year, thanks to the efforts of all the trustees of the past that have worked hard to make improvements. The trust also entered into an agreement with the church last year to provide bookkeeping and record storage services to the trust. The trustees felt the church deserved compensation for the work they do for the trust and will make a monthly payment to the church for these services. Finally, I would like to thank all the volunteers, many of you are on tonight, who spent time cleaning up the cemetery. The trustees could not do this without you, so thank you. I'd like to thank my fellow trustees, Jana McCowan, who personally painted the shed at the cemetery, and Sturdy Wanamaker, who orchestrated the establishment of our investment accounts, for all the work they did last year. And I'd like to welcome new trustee, Gary Nealon, who I know will carry on the tradition of service to the trust and the cemetery. And I'd like to thank Christina Bondenson for her invaluable service to the trust last year, and Pastor Bobby for his leadership and guidance. So while 2020 was a challenging year, in many ways it was a good year. The Agnes Brinklam Trust is in good hands both now and in the future. If you have any questions about the workings of the trust or the cemetery, feel free to ask any of the trustees at your convenience. Thank you.
Tim, thank you so much for that thoughtful report. I'll add that Tim is the outgoing trustee, but he is remaining as a consultant with our 3 trustees to help see through the pretty complex real estate sale of those 60 acres that, again, probably won't be completed till the end of this year or maybe even 2022. So thank you, Tim, for your willingness to do that. Are there questions about this particular report from the trustees?
Gene Gregory.
I realized that the trustees, I was a trustee, and I realized you report to the Brinklam Trust, but you mentioned that you sold this land. Are we entitled to know how much it brought in? How many dollars did you sell it for? Is that a secret?
No, it's not a secret. 12-acre tract was sold for 500 and something thousand. They put 20% down, and we received the balance, which was 465,000 in 2020.
Thank you.
The 60 acres is under contract for $1.6 million, and it's a very complex development deal, so it may or may not close. I'd give it a 50-50 chance at this point. But it's a very strong developer, and they're going to do a real quality project out there.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good question. Other questions for Tim in this report? I don't believe I'm seeing anything. Philip, you see anything? Nope. Okay. Tim, thank you. Appreciate the thoughtful report. And then we'll move into my report. I'm approaching this a little differently because everything's different. And I know we get zoomed out, so I thought I'd try to make this report a little more interactive. If you want, you don't have to. But in your packet, you may have seen there's a handout there that talks about the FPC soundtrack 2020, and it's got some blanks. And if, as I go through this presentation, you want to fill out that form, because I'm going to be part of this presentation involves music that gets played and so forth. You are welcome to fill it out as we go along. I'm going to have different tracks, little bits of music that I think represent key themes for us in 2020. And as I go along in this and you're listening, I've also left space on your form for other ideas. You may think of a song that better captures the idea I'm trying to say. Write it in. You can share it on Facebook afterwards on the First Pres page or at Virtual Coffee this Wednesday. So anyway, we're going to do the pastor's report a little differently. And I will again share my screen and see what we can do here. Okay. Okay. And okay. Are y'all seeing that? Thumbs up. Philip, yep. Okay, great. Last year's annual meeting. I talked a little bit about a couple of just personal goals. I wanted to learn the rhythms of First Presbyterian Church, and then March 15th hit, and I felt like lost an opportunity to learn a lot of the normal rhythms after that, and relationships. And March 15th hit, and maybe in a weird way, a lot of the relationships kept growing. And I'm so grateful for the many phone calls and texts and virtual meetings and Zooms and virtual coffees I've shared with you all, so that I could continue to live into growing and knowing who God has called together to be First Presbyterian Church. I also took a photo a lot like this. This isn't the exact one, but I talked about the intersection of the church and Georgetown sidewalk, and wanting to lean into what does it look like for whatever we do as a church, and what Jesus is doing in our midst to intersect with and be part of what Jesus is doing in our community. And that's something that has certainly continued to this church for many years. And I've wanted to be intentional about really appreciating that intersection and some of the precise ways we could lean into. And I think some of that happened. I still am longing to meet some of the local leaders and get to appreciate some of the nonprofits and so forth better. But just reminding you where we were a little bit last year. FPC Soundtrack 2020, as I mentioned, I want to talk about 2020, and I'm grateful to Jamie's video. She's already sort of marinated our hearts in 2020. And I want to look back at it and talk through some things that I noticed. And I want to do that for a couple reasons. One, the leadership at the Leader Retreat looked at a book, and one of the quotes from the book that we talked about was, the one who attempts to act and do things for others or for the world without deepening their own self-understanding will not have anything to give. And so we talked about the importance of reflection for better understanding ourselves and seeing the threads of where God's been at work, and how what God's been doing informs some of who we are and what we are going forward. The other thing I'm mindful of, we're in this sermon series in Exodus, and it really, those 10 commandments begin, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. Like, before I tell you anything else, just take a moment to remember who I am and what I've done. And so there's something fundamental to our faith that we continually look back and remember and appreciate what God has done, and name that clearly, because that also not only gives us a sense possibly of direction, but also just a sense of confidence. I'm the one who did this. Remember. And so there's a gift, I think, in looking back in order to move forward. Again, you may want a pen and paper because as we go, but I'm going to jump into my 10-song soundtrack. Let's see if this first one works. Let me know if music's not coming through. All right, first song. And you never know what you're going to get with these 10, by the way. But living on a prayer. And we started the year intentionally with a prayer focus, especially on the leadership. Those are photos from the leadership retreat. The one on the left, many of the leaders remarked later in the year that it felt like praying with their hands on the pictures of the congregation was really preparing them for the kind of year we were going to have, where they're just intentionality, all hands on board intentionality with one another was going to be needed. The leaders walked through Sailboat Church, and the main focus on catching the wind of the Holy Spirit was about prayer. We did 40 days of prayer. Some of you jumped in on that towards the end of the year into Advent. Lent, the sermon series, prayer. I think prayer marinated a lot of what we were about. And I think one of the ways we build on that for 2021 is simply not taking it for granted. We leaned into this in a variety of different ways over this last year. And insofar as we know, a sense of gratitude and all of God's done, I think we can look back and say, you know what? We did lean in with a lot of prayer. We don't want to take that for granted. Come together. This last year immediately kind of had us leaning into new ways of togetherness. As we know, I have up in the right-hand corner the Closing the Distance, the devotionals that kind of kicked off right after March 15th. I think we had 34 different folks who contributed to Closing the Distance, that daily devotional as it unfolded into the midsummer. And of course, we came together, right, and in so many different virtual ways. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a moment. You've got a picture here of the resounding voices. I want to mention the gathering place in this theme of coming together, because I actually think the gathering place is a visible, physical manifestation of the open and generous sense of togetherness we share and we want to share, and the open and generous sense of hospitality we share and want to share. It sort of represents where our hearts are right now with one another and where we want to continue in growing. And in some ways, the space now even further echoes that sentiment. Yes. Oh, we want to be a people who have space to be generously and faithfully together. And we want it to be a sense of openness, that it is hospitable and open to any and all. And I think it's remarkable that project happened during the pandemic. And in some ways, I think even accents our theme of desiring to have a genuine sense of togetherness among us. And again, the ones God is calling to be among us. And I think one of the things we saw this past year with Come Together is the way Come Together can and does happen beyond the Sunday moment, as central and vital as that is. There've just been so many creative outlets that have come out virtually, and a handful in person as well, whether youth or cemetery service, so forth. But this has been vital for us, is the way paradoxically we have come together. Pretty soon after the pandemic, the officers with Karen Rayburn really taking the lead, just divided up the church directory and started calling folks and trying to take a page per direct person for the directory and just trying to connect. And eventually some folks didn't need a call every week, and some folks didn't always connect or go through. Other folks built incredible friendships in these weekly phone calls with their page, people they maybe never met or just kind of in passing in the church building. And suddenly this becomes a thing, right? To talk on Sunday afternoon and share life. And there were just a lot of calls to say, most fundamentally, I love you, actually. And we're in this together. And it was a beautiful thing. And then more later in the year, we've had some of our older members connecting with some of our younger families, and an endeavor that Penny and Stephanie and some others, Amanda Tolbert, have helped put together. And a lot of those are over phone calls. But what I love about these is I know this was outside of the comfort zone for a lot of people. This required a lot of flexibility for officers and different folks who who said, well, I said yes to serve because, well, I can help put together a program or look at a budget sheet or help folks think about this. Really required a kind of a level of flexibility and discomfort, quite frankly. But it was telling that the officers really jumped in on this, and it proved such a sort of creative blessing. And I know it didn't work perfectly across the board, but there were a lot of just beautiful moments in the willingness to be flexible and try to connect over what is now an older technology, the phone call, hence the older looking phone on my slide. Who's Zooming who? Goodness gracious, so many Zoom meetings, including this one, right? I just very quickly counted. I think Christina helped me. I think we had 38 virtual staff meetings over Zoom, 29 virtual coffees over Zoom, 46 virtual services of worship. That doesn't count. Goodness gracious. The music ministry, Wednesday nights, youth, Bible study, Sunday school, Stephen minister. So many. A year ago this time, to say, let's join a Zoom call would have just sounded probably foreign, honestly, to 90% of our ears. Like the sentence didn't make sense. And this slide to me reminds me just how much we've grown in terms of technology. We know what it is to Zoom. We started a podcast. We actually published 62 different podcast episodes of sermons and musics and services over this past year. Last January, we started in with our new emails with the staff, everyone having kind of a uniform email. February and March was when we really started to lean into this new IT infrastructure and system in the church building itself. Certainly live streaming has come a long way since we started with that in March. Sound system, figured out that configuration for cemetery services. Summer launching of the new website. It is remarkable where we've come with our technological abilities, and then in the fall with just the way the Bitmoji classrooms for the children and the ways that has been so interactive and creative. So many ways we could talk about. I should right here just a shout out to all of you on this call who learned a significant amount of new technology. Some people joke that in the church, change is like this four-letter word, but the truth is, well, one, change is always happening, but two, God is faithful, and it's just remarkable the way we've come together and discovered this. When I think about building on this for 2021, I think about continue to harness this technology with a new intentionality too, to how we can reach out beyond ourselves. We've had folks accidentally show up or almost stumble into our Sunday school classes here and there who have become regulars. We've had folks find our service of worship, almost stumble into it, find it, become regulars. We haven't been overly intentional with some of our outreach. We started to towards the end of last year, but we're recognizing we're learning technology well, and so certainly on staff, our evangelism committee, there's an awareness that we can really lean into the technology that we're learning about to be intentional and how we really engage and relate and connect to folks beyond these walls who may well want to know what God's doing in our midst and how to be part of that. I don't think you can look back at 2020 with any honest assessment without saying that it's also been really hard. At times, all of us have been dead tired, whether from just the monotony and the underlying anxiety, or from all the ways this time has really stretched us thin and asked so much of us in new capacities. It's been hard. We've been running on empty in seasons and times, and it's grateful that we do it together, because then we can pick one another up and lean into Jesus, who continues to take our burdens. This, of course, you saw in Jamie's presentation, is something that folks submitted, those 3 words that were emblematic of the pandemic thus far. That was back in May. And the most repeated word among us was anxiety. And there were a lot of good words in there too, but folks were honest, and I appreciate that. And just naming it. And I think the honesty is one of the strengths of this congregation, has been for a long time, and only grew that much more this year. I loved in the Steving ministry training opportunities on Monday nights, I saw folks sharing with one another with a real vulnerability and love. I saw on the Blue Christmas service a genuine vulnerability and openness. I saw it unfolding in phone calls and texts and emails and all the different ways. But I think, as hard as this year's been, one of the strengths of this congregation is the ability to be honest with where we are, and know that when we just open ourselves where we are, God meets us there and starts to carry. And so I think we build on this in 2021 by, just like prayer, not taking this for granted. People are not, if they ever were, they're certainly not now, drawn to the church that looks put together, looks polished, looks perfect. Honestly, people are aching to be alongside real people and know a God who meets real people and walks with love in the real situations. And so it is a gift to be able to name where we are, regardless. Does anybody know what time it is? I feel like it has been, thinking of that Ecclesiastes verse, right? There's a time for everything, a season under the sun for everything. And I have felt just acutely, we have continually been discerning, well, what time is it? What season is it? And in particular, we have worked hard to discern, is it a season for us to gather in person, outdoor, or not? How many people, what capacity? How do we discern how we go about navigating this pandemic? Pretty quickly into this, the Safety and Security Committee made sense to have a sort of a subset of that, really focus in on some of the safety and security around the pandemic specifically. And so that's where OddTap got formed, opened the doors, and there's all the people. And a wonderful crew chaired by Karen Rayburn. Originally Kelly Seaman and Joy Bedford were on that, and Joy's retired. Kelly's on staff, but we've got Nancy Robon and Jamie Cowan and Lynn Azuma, Christina Bondison. Just doing a great job trying to help Session navigate what time is it. I've got a graphic on there of the Williamson County COVID numbers because, well, we've been trying to look at the data to help with time. What's the CDC saying? The state of Texas, what's the Williamson County specifically saying? We've done a couple online surveys. What are the people saying? You all are so wise and thoughtful, and let's try to make sure those voices are part of the discernment. What time is it, and what can and should we be doing, and what are we going to refrain from our time? I think at the end of the day, we've continued to come back. It is always a time, building or no building, walls or no walls, always a time to love God with everything and love neighbor with everything. And every decision the session has made with regard to this pandemic is what is truly most loving and most wise, both for us and our neighbor. There's always this recognition of the both and in these considerations. And it has not been easy, has not been something any of those folks in the core of this, I knew what they were signing up for. But I am grateful for the faithfulness of continually asking the question. I think we lean into 2021. We build on this by just recognizing that we continue to ask the question. Because if you look at even the history of OddTap, they did a wonderful history summary of where we've been and how we've used different metrics at different times to help us appreciate how we think about things, and indoor and outdoor. We've evolved as science has evolved, as Williamson County has changed, as we learn more about the virus, all of that, we've evolved. Let's recognize we will continue to evolve and discern what it is to love God and love neighbor in 2021. "2020, I feel everyone in some capacity or another rediscovered or discovered with a new appreciation what a wonderful world God has given us. In a specific way, First Presbyterian, realizing the walls inside were not going to be a viable solution, Goodness gracious, what creativity. The thought to have cemetery services, which were so well received, porch pals, and living into our call to study and pray and love one another in community. What a gift. Our youth group met in so many creative ways outdoors. Our confirmation class was outdoors. Our Meals on Wheels and Ben Nichols and that whole crew, what a gift. They kept finding a way outdoors to do the meals to some of the more vulnerable in our community. What a gift to find ways with the education nurture and they're focused on kids getting packages to our children and going to their front doorstep so that they have a great package that can be opened as part of their Wednesday night Zoom and make that so much more interactive and engaging. Other times there were just ministry visits that have been happening on people's porch and outdoors. I've just been amazed by the creativity, and I think there's been actually a lot of joy in just rediscovering the gift of these spaces with one another. For 2021, I think we build on this with more creative opportunities, pandemic and beyond. I know already, I've heard in leadership discussions about wanting to pull together a socially distanced picnic when the right time comes for all of us to have space out on the green together to get more cemetery services again. People have asked about cemetery services and other unique opportunities beyond the pandemic. How can we have beautiful worship out there in other capacities at other times? So I'm looking forward to that. I think we can lean into what we've discovered because there is great joy we found in seeing that. Man in the mirror. George Floyd was killed this past summer. That really set off a spark of a lot of people in general, but churches specifically, asking questions. What does this mean for the church, for people of faith, for Christians who follow Jesus? And I felt like it was a space where there were a lot of questions being asked. All right, what do we mean by racism? What do we mean by structural racism, anti-racism? What does this have to do with the gospel? How do we understand Jesus who broke down the dividing wall and made us one community? And how is it that we live more faithfully into that across all these lines and then this ugly history we have with racism in this country? And I saw a lot of this congregation lean into not so much saying, well, here's the answer, here's the way forward, here's what I think. I actually saw most folks across the board, the posture was, I need to look at myself in the mirror and learn and ask some questions, ask uncomfortable questions, ask them personally, ask them with my spouse, ask them over Zoom. We talked about some of this at a virtual coffee. A number of you jumped in on the summer class where we were trying to just lean in and learn. And really it was mainly about asking questions and just trying to share where we were and learning how to articulate the hard conversation and the hard stuff, but just being honest and wanting to grow, but not grow again into more and more answers, but just better and better questions and self-reflection and even confession. And I think that was a faithful posture to take as we seek to how we know the good news of Jesus's mercy and love alongside of and on behalf of our Black and brown sisters and brothers. I think we build on this by honestly in 2021 continuing in this posture. Some of these books I have on the screen are some of the ones you all read last year. Anxious to Talk About It was one that a lot of folks read in a couple different book group offerings that were offered. And I think we can continue to have that posture because it really is fairly new for most of us to try to sit and hear other voices and appreciate a whole other way of seeing reality and appreciating how to come alongside some of our Black and brown brothers and sisters. So I think the posture really does continue. And I've even talked with some of you already about a handful of ways we might actively have some offerings even this coming year for us to keep considering our space in all of this and even eventually building, leaning into some relationships in our community as well here in Georgetown. Seasons of love. This slide has to do with the remarkable amount of staffing changes this church has known this past year. Whether it was a mix of retirement, budget realities and restructuring right amid the pandemic, new calls, new seasons of life for folks. But I just quickly try and remind you, this year began, Amy Pratt was on staff, and then she finished her time as Logos director, and Susan Eisenhower came on to staff. During the summer, we had a music ministry restructuring, and Chad Hansen and Sandy Hayes, who were on the staff formally, were no longer so, but very much available to continue subbing and helping out with our music. Joy retired. Stephanie came on board. We shifted the approach to the cleaning services, which meant our beloved Kathy Davenport, no longer our custodian. And so there was that change. And then DL and Sarah, a new season of life, a new call at this time. And then Kelly coming on board the first of this year. That's a lot. That is a lot. And of course, Mike Roberts, we celebrated him as pastor emeritus, but that's goodness, that was just a couple of years ago. He retired. That's a lot. And that's a lot for any system, any church. But I think Seasons of Love's the right song, because every staff member I just mentioned has brought or does bring exceptional gifts. Right? These are just loving, remarkable, incredibly faithful people across the board, whether they were on staff, they're not at the moment, or now they're on staff. What a gift that a church can say, regardless of the season, we have such exceptional staff. I think we build on this in 2021. By continuing to encourage the new staff who come alongside the old staff. And we are just starting to find our way as a team and solidify this new identity. We're looking forward to it, but you can be in prayer because we're already doing it. We're enjoying it. We're looking forward to growing together, but you can be in prayer for us as we continue to solidify this new identity as a team. And I, for one, am deeply grateful for the team we have. It is stunningly gifted and good crew. You know that. And we'll look forward to continue to serve and love you all as we continue this year. All right, last song on the soundtrack, and then some quick summary comments, because I know we're getting long here. Thank you. This was a year where we did take a number of different times to honor those who have gone before us. As you can see on that graphic, those are 20 different folks, family of First Presbyterian Church, who went to be with the Lord, dating back to last November, or November of 19, All Saints. That's a lot. That's a lot of dear folks to whom we have offered thanks, given thanks, celebrated. Logos Sunday, we celebrated champions of the faith, and part of that, you remember, was wearing those bibs as you left worship, where you put a name or two or three or four of saints who we love and know and care about. And so we celebrated them as those champions of faith that Logos Sunday. We honored Pastor Mike as pastor emeritus as a thank you again to one of the saints who's done so much for this church in years previous. Which is to say, this has been a hard, some of these transitions to lose these people from our visible midst, and yet the fundamental sentiment has been one of gratitude and just recognizing what a gift and treasure we have had. God has blessed us with. I think we lean on that into 2021 because there's plenty of reason we can name for anxiety, unknowns, fears, what ifs. But I think gratitude can and should and will be at the heartbeat of what we continue to be about as followers of Jesus Christ. And grateful for those who've gone before us, and grateful for even this entire year now that has gone before us. If you need a little summary slide, I won't unpack this any further. It just kind of helps you see what I've talked through. And then last slide, you know, I heard someone talking about the difference between strategic planning and strategic positioning recently. Strategic plan, here's the 5 next steps onto this thing. Strategic positioning is sort of about naming some of the values so that no matter what happens or where you go, you have a sense for the anchoring values. And when I share the narrative of 2020 with you all in this manner, here are some of the values I think that anchor us right now and have been for some time and maybe are all the more acutely obvious in 2020 and into 2021. I say genuine fellowship. I think that speaks to the desire, not for just sort of the polite church on Sunday fellowship. I think this congregation has and can continue to lean into an honest, genuine, love and know one another, porch pals in one another's lives kind of fellowship. Flexibility, like the officers and those phone calls, but really goodness across the board with so much we've learned this year. And I think that's going to continue to be a key value amidst so much change. Flexibility, creative outreach. I'm thinking about the technology we want to continue to harness to reach out beyond our walls, but also just the way Meals on Wheels has continued forward creatively, the way our Sunday schools are pairing with our mission committee this spring to kind of bring together some creative opportunities between discipleship and mission to enhance their work. I think we can continue to lean into that. Courage, and I'm talking about that on a host of fronts, but I'm just thinking of the amount of new ministries we risked last year that were just new. Logos Live, Wednesday nights with the kids, the combination of a Sunday school, surveyors, home builders, right, that's going on right now, outdoor services, gathering place, porch pals, resounding voices. And one of the things I love about a lot of these efforts that were fresh and new is the way they integrate and are continually working to integrate different parts of the church, like Sunday schools, different generations. Humility, this speaks to our posture and the way we want to continue to learn from a space of questions. And then gratitude. We could never have anticipated this time last year what 2020 would look like. And so I don't think we have any sense all that God has in store for us, but I am confident that we will gather this time next year and have a profound sense of gratitude once more, because I'm convinced 2020 has convinced me again, God is abundantly faithful. Thank you for taking some time to hear my overly long report. That's all I have. Are there questions on that report before we have, we do need to approve a motion to approve all of the reports that have been given.
So moved.
For a second?
Second.
Second, okay. You can unmute, and all in favor of receiving the reports, the motion to receive all the reports that have been given, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed, no? I think we're good. A motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. All in favor? Aye.
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 Bye, y'all.
Excellent. Thank y'all. I'm going to close in prayer. That's the last thing on the docket, and we will go from here. God, thanks. Thank you for your faithfulness, for your goodness, for what you've done in 2020, despite and amidst everything. Holy Spirit, hold us, carry us, lead us with courage and gratitude and love as we step together into 2021. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you, Bobby.
Thanks,
Have a
everybody.
great night. See everybody's faces.
Goodbye, everybody.
Bye,
Bye, Annabelle.
Bye, Annabelle.
Good night. Have a good week.